Chile, 2006, Part 14, Easter Island. The following morning I woke up a little before 8, which was enough sleep, but with some pressure in my head, probably from too much sleep actually, or my body and blood pressure just needed some time to adjust to the new time zone, the new climate, space and circumstances. During my breakfast, I had a great chat with a Polish guy from the boarding house, and I also had 3 cups of coffee, quite unusual for me, but my head did clear up a little. I went for a leisurely walk to the tourist information center, then to the market where I bought additional water, then I visited some souvenir shops and went to an internet cafe and a post office to send postcards, but I also ate some tuna and cheese empanadas, which seemed like too much. Still, on my way back to my room, I stopped at a cafe with a nice view and had a guava juice there. While I was relaxing at the cafe near the ocean, and the weather was ideal since the sky had completely cleared up and it was not too hot, I enjoyed watching local guys practicing surfing on the waves that were breaking in front of Hangaroa. These were not big waves, but it was quite clear to me that even those small ones required considerable skill. The point is that this morning I was in no hurry whatsoever. Namely, I came to the island for a whole week, so I thought I had plenty of time to see everything well and thoroughly, as well as to take it easy, as was the case. For that afternoon I planned to go for a nice walk to Volcano Ranokau and the ceremonial site of Orongo, in other words, to the very southwest corner of the island. I started early in the afternoon and first went again through the fishing village Hangapico, but all the time looking at the Pacific and the waves I was passing by. I had a difficulty detaching myself from the scenery because each second and each angle of watching filled me up with enjoyment. Still, I was a woman with a mission, so I kept going. It takes around 4 to 5 hours of leisurely walk to reach Orongo from Hangaroa, taking the museum as a starting point, since it is some 8 kilometers away, a little across the flat terrain and then uphill. However, I did not go immediately uphill, but rather I went closer to the ocean, and there the views were again fantastic. I was standing on the edge of the soil part which stood above the water, and from there I could nicely see the entrance into a huge cave called Anakaitangata. From the other side of the deep bay, so to speak, of the Pacific, which goes towards the entrance into the cave, it was even better to see how the cave was covered by rocks over which there was soil and grass, but it still all seemed quite solid and durable. Those caves are created from the so-called lava tunnels, when there is a lava flow which is of different composition in comparison to the surrounding rocks. If that flow is of a more porous composition than the surrounding area, it collapses over time, and a tunnel remains instead of it. Well, in this case, what was left was a cave. When talking about lava and rocks on Easter Island, let me say that the shore of the island consists mostly of black volcanic rocks, which come up to the surface from the great depths of the ocean, with very little coral, although there are a couple of adorable small sand beaches. After the cave, the trail led me to Ahurei Ingapeta, which in the past used to be an altar place with a range moais of different sizes. Nowadays, among the grass, it is possible to see only remains of broken rocks. The next stop was at the Manavai Exhibition Garden, a center in which there are structures made to show how the local population used to grow crops for food. Namely, the Rapa Nui used to arrange stones in a circle up to the height of almost 1 meter, while the thickness of the wall was almost half a meter, and in the middle of this construction there grew crops. These structures are called the manavai. The reason for making the manavai is that the wall protected the plants from the wind and the sun, in addition to which the moisture was retained there for a little while longer, and the fertilization was improved. This technique made a significant difference in the yields obtained from within the manavai and what could be grown out in the open. At this center, a botanical garden of a kind, within the scope of some projects, they are working nowadays on the recultivation of the endangered tree, Latin name Sophora toromiro. This is an endemic tree which used to grow naturally only on Easter Island, and which the indigenous population practically eradicated. At one point in time, this tree species could no longer be found in nature at all, and there were only a few specimens left at the botanical garden in Gothenburg in Sweden. The north side of Ranokau volcano, and that is the sunny side, since Easter Island is in the south hemisphere, is nowadays forested quite a lot, up to a certain height, and that forest consists, among other species, of palms, eucalyptus trees, cypresses, and acacias. A trail leads between the trees, and it is very pleasant to walk in the shade created by the trees. From that shade and from the height I had a very nice view towards Hangaroa. As I've said, that is the only proper settlement on the island, although there are scattered houses here and there. Between Hangaroa and Ranokau volcano it is possible to see the airport strip. Still, this is no ordinary airport strip, but a specifically long one, made especially so that even a space shuttle could have landed on it. Namely, while this NASA program was operational, it was necessary to ensure that in a case of an emergency, the space shuttles could land in different parts of the world. Due to the size of the Pacific, there was a certain hole, so to speak, in this plan with alternative landing, and then the Americans and the Chileans agreed and in 1987 made a huge airport strip here. The local population kept protesting, but with no effect. Now they don't have to worry anymore. The space shuttles no longer fly. Since I'm mentioning local population here, let me share some of my thoughts. Although the Magallanes region, and that is the far south of Chile, has some ideas regarding its independence, and although there is a great mixture of people and races of different origin throughout the country, one still gets an impression that there is a national unity. On the other hand, in the case of the Rapa Nui, this cannot be noticed, and as I've mentioned, they are not thrilled about being part of Chile and talk about it as if it were some foreign body from which they want independence. I even heard from a guide in the continental part of the country without asking him for his opinion, that he, quote, would give them their independence, end of quote. On the other hand, with the desire to maintain the unity of the country that covers such vast distances, the time difference between Easter Island and the continental part of the country is only 2 hours, while it should be 4. After leaving that forested belt, one gets to a clearing and there is an ascent which is not great but is constant. By the way, this hiking trail is called Te Ara o Te Ao, which approximately means the road of leadership, El Camino del Mando, and it evokes memories of the rituals from the past which had their peak in the place called Orongo. This constant climbing took my breath away occasionally, but the people making the trail and putting some information boards along the way had thought of everything. Namely, at one point there was a rest stop with a couple of trees providing a shade and with a couple of logs that served as benches. Perfect thing. From there I had again a wonderful view at Hangaroa, the island and seemingly endless ocean. I didn't encounter anyone along my way, but every now and then I saw a couple of people in the distance. I should also mention that the summit of the volcano may be reached by a car following a dirt road, but this makes sense only if one comes here for a day or 2. Although walking uphill may be tiring, it gets its perfect sense when one reaches the top, for there is a surprise waiting, and that is a stunningly beautiful scenery. It concerns a volcano crater with a diameter of 1,600 meters and depth of 200 meters. As you are approaching the edge, thus seeing more and more of the crater, your breath is just leaving you. The crater contains water, with a myriad of islets covered in grass, while the water in between reflects the perfectly blue sky, making everything blue and green. The point to which the trail leads is called simply the Ranocao viewpoint, Mirador Ranocao. However, the path does not end there, but I first sat down in order to enjoy the truly stupendous view. In addition to the crater, as well as the ocean, when you turn around, you can nicely see the rest of the island, including a volcano on Poike Peninsula, on the other corner, so to speak, of the island. At the time when I was on Easter Island, I didn't have a photo camera that could make panoramic photos. Still, thanks to my friend Velislav, you can see now what it all looks like when 3 photos I have taken separately are merged into one. You can go to my blog and enjoy that. But let me go back to my visit to Ranocao. It is precisely this lake, so to speak, in the crater of Ranocao volcano that constitutes one of the 2 natural reservoirs with fresh, that is, potable water, and this is where the local population used to get their water in the past. Walking further along the rim of the crater, I soon saw 3 islets called Motu, Nui, Iti and Kao Kao. They are exceptionally important for the Rapa Nui, and in the past it was here that young men used to show and prove their abilities. The biggest one, in relative terms, is Motu Nui. The islands are the nesting ground for wild birds, and since 1976 they have been protected as nature reserve. The one closest to the shore is Motu Kao Kao, which is in fact a huge sharp rock coming out of the ocean like a 20-meter high giant needle. It is particularly interesting that these islets are summits of large underwater volcanic mountains, the foot of which is some 2,000 meters under the surface of the ocean. Right opposite of these islets, on the top of the crater, there are some structures like dugouts made of stone, and this is where those rituals used to take place. This entire section is called Orongo, which is the name for the ceremonial village. Namely, Orongo used to be the center of a cult, in the middle of which there was the Birdman. In the past, it was here that the annual race was organized for young men who had to climb a few hundred meters down to the ocean. Then they had to swim to Motu Nui, get from there the first laid egg of the sooty tern, and bring it undamaged back to Orongo. This was very dangerous, and it often happened that the young participants got killed by falling off the cliffs. And the young people of today think that they have some issues they complain about. When approaching Orongo, I even passed by some tourists, but before long they left, and I was again on my own visiting the site. But not completely alone. Namely, there I soon came across a guard with whom I started to chat, and it was all very interesting, for he was a pure philosopher. He also advised me where to step outside the trail in order to get a better photograph, and yet to be safe from plummeting into the ocean. Then he escorted me to the top, the end of Orongo, where a holy place is located which is fenced. There is a small dugout there, and it is supposed that this was the place where priests used to stay at, since there is a perfect view at the 3 islets from there. That viewpoint of a kind is surrounded by rocks that are all carved out, and it is possible to see numerous petroglyphs there that mostly depict that Birdman. After the visit to this spot, I slowly headed back while still chatting with the guard, but this time I was more focused on the crater, which I was looking at again. There are even some trees growing on the slopes within the crater. In the past, there were some attempts at growing different crops there, but nothing caught on. The water in the crater comes from rainfall, but nowadays it is no longer used for drinking on account of health safety measures. As we walked, the guard also told me a story about how a few years earlier his own mother, who was an elderly lady at the time, came to the crater, went down into its interior, and then the next day she was found dead there. As he claimed, ever since her death, he had been sensing the spirit of his mother being there. Then he also allowed me to go down the crater a little bit, and even showed me the best spot, for I wanted to do a meditation there. It was certainly great, but then again, everything was great about this place. It is interesting that some time later I saw this man on TV in Serbia, in some English program filmed on Easter Island, so I cried out, "Hey, I know this guy." So, after the successful meditation, on my way back to Hangaroa, I followed the same trail, but by then the sun had gone significantly down, and everything had a different hue, while the sun rays were no longer as strong as earlier. And then, as if the day had not already been sufficiently great and successful, back home I was greeted by live music. Namely, the son of my landlady had his band, and they played on the porch of the house, with loudspeakers and all, while a few girls danced. You can again go to my blog and have a look there.